the paths. Thank you for recording. We're going to be pretty efficient with our agenda today, moving through some welcomes and introductions. We do have a couple brief action items for the committee to add. One is just an update for committee members to know that the Safe Routes to School legislative concept letter that went out to review and we took action on as a committee at our last meeting is done, with the exception of Jessica making a couple little fine-tuning edits of adding in the appropriate reference for where the legislative concepts are at in the process and adding in some crash statistics for the pedestrian and bicycle statement that's made. So that one is moving forward. At the end of this meeting, we will add an agenda item to talk about the draft Oregon Transportation Plan update, comments from our committee. And other than that, we will follow the process as shown in the agenda, which is focus on the Oregon Community Paths grant scenarios, and then preparing for the recommendation at our next meeting and next steps associated with that. So good to see lots of visitors here today. We're going to do introductions just of the committee members and OBPAC support staff to start. There will be an opportunity for public comment after that, and we'll go through some of those details. Essentially, no comments on specific projects, but if you have comments on the decision-making approach and process with which OBPAC is making decisions, we welcome comments of that nature. And I'll kind of spell out some more details in a moment after intros. So introductions of committee members. I'm Emma Newman, co-chair of the Oregon Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee. I will hand it over to, or I'm in Springfield, Oregon, and I'll hand it over to my co-chair Mavis to introduce herself.
Hi, I am Mavis Hartz. I am a co-chair as well. I am in La Grande, Oregon, and I am currently in my bike shop. I can hear everybody getting their bikes tuned up downstairs. And I'm excited to be able to shift the $15 I have to take from every person that buys a new bike with a wheel size over 25 inches on to something positive. Yay! Let's see, who's next? Andre, there you go.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Andre Lightsey Walker, he, him pronouns, at-large member based in Portland, Oregon. And I will pass it on to Del.
Hi there, I'm Del Scharfenberg. I'm a fairly new member to this group. I represent the ORTEC, the Oregon Recreational Trails Committee. And I live in Milwaukee, Oregon. I work in Beaverton, Oregon, and I bike commute 24 miles a day for that.
Thanks, Del. And Lauren.
Good afternoon, I'm Lauren Morris, and I am a member of this committee. I work for the Coquille Indian Tribe as their mobility program coordinator. I'm excited to talk about or look at this community path stuff. Otherwise, that's all I have.
Good to see you, Lauren. Thanks, everyone. I think we covered the OBPAC members who are present. If there's other OBPAC members here who are off video or not seeing you, please speak up now.
Oh, I think that's everybody.
Other than the staff. Thank you, Jessica.
Yep, and Erin Mendez and Beth Young send their regrets that they were not able to join us today. I'm Jessica Horning. Good afternoon, everybody. She, her, or they, them pronouns. Either one is fine. I am ODOT's Bicycle and Pedestrian Program Manager and have the privilege of staffing OBPAC in that role.
Thank you, and Alan.
Hi, I'm Alan Thompson, he, him pronouns, and I'm the Community Paths Program Manager. Excited to be here.
Thank you. The main show today. I'm so glad you're here. It wouldn't be much of a meeting without you. Fantastic. So for those of you who might have come in a few minutes late, we are going to add the draft Oregon Transportation Plan update OBPAC comment letter to the end of our agenda so that we have time to briefly address that. With that, we will move into the public comment. So OBPAC is committed to diversity, inclusion, civility, and respect. Committee members and members of the public who are providing public comment are expected to be respectful and maintain civility by avoiding foul, obscene, hateful, and racially or ethnically derogatory language that creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive environment. All that being said, we really appreciate public comments that we get. It's really a great conduit for hearing more across the state what's going on and things that we should be aware of. For today's public comment, because we are discussing the Oregon Community Paths program, I want to note that public comments are not going to be impacting the application scores. And this is really about the scenarios that we're developing and not about individual projects. So comments are welcome on the decision-making approach, but not on specific projects. And with that, if you would like to provide comment, please either raise your virtual hand or put a comment in the chat. And if you're calling in by phone, please come off of mute and let us know that you would like to speak. We may just have a lot of people excited to observe our meeting to learn more information, because we're all here to learn and get oriented to the process. So
I do see one hand.
Matt from City of Bonita, welcome.
Thanks very much. It was a pregnant pause because I had trouble finding my raise hand button for of all things. So apologize for the dramatic pause. The comment I would provide would be on the scenarios, the processes. Having reviewed this, the point scoring, seems to be dictating a lot of how the allocations go, and not knowing a lot behind the point scoring. We take faith that those folks who have evaluated them, the points, the criteria makes sense. So I see that there's an opportunity, which is part of this recommendation of trying to, provide more opportunity through this program. So I think the scenario 2 is what we would prefer as far as recognizing the scoring and recognizing the maximum benefit for what the program could provide. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you so much. And if you stick around, you will learn a little bit more about the scoring rubric, since that is in Alan's presentation.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Becky Taylor.
Hello, everyone. I'm Becky Taylor. I'm a senior transportation planner with Lane County, and Lane County has 2 applications, one in partnership with the City of Bonita and one with Florence. And I'm not here to speak about those projects, even though I wish I could. I'm going to respect your direction to not try to advocate for those projects. Those projects are scoring just below the funding on the priority list that was published yesterday. So my request would be, as you make decisions about additional funding and perhaps selecting projects that are just below the threshold, if you would also pay attention to projects that really lack any facilities. I noticed that some of the projects that scored higher and are eligible for funding, some of those projects have walking and biking facilities currently, but they might not be ideal. Whereas other projects don't have any infrastructure at all, making it really unsafe or impossible. So I hope that this committee would take a closer look at that, all of the projects through that lens as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we have Megan Ramey.
Yes, hello everybody. So my name is Megan Ramey. I'm the active transportation representative for ODOT Region 1 ACT. And I'm also the Safe Routes to School manager for Hood River County. And I was curious if as part of the scoring, you're going to publish the Transportation Disadvantage Index score. And thank you guys for your volunteer work.
Thank you, Megan. Good to see you again. And Alan, do you have a quick response to Megan's question about the TDI, Transportation Disadvantage Index score?
Yes, we can publish that because that was something that you had provided as part of the application. If it was not correct, where there were a few that had a range of 1.6 to 2.3, we went in there and we actually looked at it and found what the TDI, the raw TDI score would be.
Great, thank you. Anyone else like to speak? I don't see anyone else commenting in the chat or any virtual raised hands. I don't know if anyone's calling in by phone. It doesn't look like it.
Nope, not seeing anyone on the phone or any others in the chat or with raised hands. So I think we're good, Emma.
Great, sounds good. So as I was sharing earlier, today is really setting up our committee to orient to the materials, know what decision we will be asked to make. And so Alan's here to help us with that today. Our role is really focused on review of the approach and kind of selecting different scenarios, looking through different lenses, but we are not changing the scores of any specific applications or looking at specific projects. I will turn it over in a moment, but I wanted to ask Jessica to remind committee members about contact or communication with applicants over the next month before we make our decision.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Emma. So just wanted to give committee members a quick reminder. This is our second round of reviewing and OBPAC making a recommendation on these funds. Our first round, some committee members were contacted by applicants. And just like we're not changing scores during this meeting based on public comment, we ask that if you are contacted by applicants that you just let them know that you can't really have those sorts of conversations at this point in the process, and that we don't really have the ability to impact those scores since they're based on kind of quantitative review criteria. So you can feel free to forward anybody with questions or comments on the process to Alan or other broad ped bike questions to me.
Thank you. So now over to Alan. I'll let you take it away with your presentation to help inform us and orient to the
All right, you just have to hold on for my dog barking. She should stop.
No problem. And committee members, as we go through, if you have questions, there will be a few pause points to ask those. So when we get to the pause after a section that you have questions about, please raise your hands and we'll get into some clarification. So we all are prepared for this decision.
All right. Okay, everyone. Hi, I'm Alan Thompson, Oregon Community Pass Program Manager. I tend to talk really fast, so if I'm speaking too fast for anyone in the committee, please let me know and I will slow down. What we will be discussing today, an overview of the current process, the scenarios. The state has no scenarios because there's just $4 million in funding, period. And then today's discussion, May 22nd OBPAC meeting, there will be an action item to choose which scenario there will be. A recap of the solicitation schedule. It started actually before August 1st when we started doing the notices of the solicitation happening on August 1st. We had 3 webinars once a month in May, June, and July prior to August 1st. And then August 1st was the pre-application, used to be called the letter of interest. November 15th through 2022 through January 31st was the application period. And then we did the application review, and we did something different this time, is that we did an initial review without looking at the project readiness and their ability to move forward. And we hired a consultant to review the otherwise top 15 applications to do a technical scoping review and to see if it matches what we had at ODOT, and with varying levels of success. And the reason why we did that is with the first cycle, there were one of the reasons why we have $1.8 million is because several applications had to either cancel, downscope, or convert from construction to project refinement because what they bid on in the application did not match. And part of that is, this is a new program. Part of it is inflation with COVID and everything else. There was a huge influx, and that created a lot of problems. The issue with this program is that we can't just give more money because it's a competitive grant process. So we have a choice of either canceling, downscoping, and if it's construction, converting it to a project refinement. So we were telling everyone that if they were starting from scratch and they hadn't done any work before, always start with project refinement, because then you don't end up with a lot of these issues. So after today, we go to the May meeting where OBPAC makes its recommendations, and then it goes to the Oregon Transportation Commission, and they will approve the projects. And then October 1st, which is the beginning of the federal fiscal year, we begin executing the IGAs. And the reason why we do it at October 1st is because if we do it any earlier, we have to spend money in this fiscal year that ends on September 30th. And that's very difficult to do with projects that are just getting awarded and haven't even had the IGA executed yet. So that is the reason why we're waiting until October 1st. So available funds. This is also interesting. We started off with transportation alternative funds at $18 million. And transportation alternative funds are federal funds. And there was also 0 state funds because we had spent all of our state funds in the 2020 cycle, and we're rebuilding it up. It's building up at around $900,000 a year. We're trying to get it up to about $4 million, and we were hoping we'll have that for the 2024 cycle. It's hard to say because we are limited to cash on hand for state funds. And so several things happened before the solicitation. The federal government passed a new bill that gave a whole bunch of I don't know what the acronym means, it's JTIIA, but it ended up giving us $25 million for this cycle and next cycle. And so splitting it in half a little bit more this cycle, we ended up with $30 million in transportation alternative funds. And then Safe Routes School had some federal funds as well. So we had $3 million in federal Safe Routes School funds that we are to spend, with the requirement being that it must be within 1 mile of a school and match all of the other requirements for, and have a letter from the school talking about the benefit to biking and walking to school. So that brought us up to $33 million in federal. I mentioned earlier that we had no state funds. 15 days before the pre-application started, we were given $4 million in TOF. Thank you, ODOT, so much. That gives us more money and able to do things. But because it was such a different amount, I'll show you the next one. That gives us $37 million. And so the way we broke this down, construction, $30 million, that's $27 million for OCP and $3 million for an OCP / Safe Routes to School hybrid. We have state construction at $4 million and project refinement planning at $3 million. And that's what we put out for the solicitation. And we upped everything from the last cycle because of the issues we had with being able to fund. Project refinement, we did have it 75,000 to 200,000, and we found that, or excuse me, 75,000 to 750,000, and we found that that minimum was just not enough. The very absolute bare minimum for a federal planning project with ODOT administering is 150,000 and may go up even more later on, because about 50,000 of that will be just the administrative costs. It gets to be that high when you're having ODOT plus a consultant working on this. Federal construction, we bumped that up to $500 million to $6 million. We increased, that was $200 million to $4 million. And so we bumped that up also because of inflation and recognizing that, you know, both at the low end and at the high end. And so because we had just 2 weeks before the solicitation, we all of a sudden had that state money for $2 million, or excuse me, $4 million. And the idea being how best to use it. And we thought, well, we have a large chunk for large projects for federal construction. We can use state money for small grants, and $200,000 to $1 million. And that's less of a burden on trying to to meet that 30% match, particularly for small cities that may just have a project, and it evens it out where the larger projects may already have a lot of work behind it. And what we're finding is that the state construction, this really helps a lot with it, particularly with the smaller communities. Any questions so far? All right, going on to the next one. So
I real quickly, Ellen,
yes.
I just want to say for committee members, since some of you are newer, Alan mentioned that this is the first round that the Community Paths program has gotten a consultant to do some scoping and cost affirmations and improvements for applicants, and that is a really new innovative thing that Alan's led the charge on this time around, that is in part in response to some of the questions and concerns from OBPAC about how could we provide more support for locals to make sure that we are really getting them the right amount to achieve what they're trying to achieve. So just wanted to point that out and thank Alan for being responsive to that feedback.
Oh, thank you. All right, now here's the scoring rubrics, and the rubrics were developed by OBPAC as part of the last cycle, the 2020 cycle. We did some slight changes to it. We added in the cost schedule to account for this, the consultant reviewing the cost, and the outreach, because that dropped the equity down a little bit. We incorporated a lot of equity questions into the outreach. Where we were asking a lot of, did you reach out to transportation historically disadvantaged communities? Did you include them as part of your planning process? Are their recommendations being used as part of your plan going forward? So we have that in there as well, which increases the equity. And we're hoping also, rather than just looking at generic areas that meet various criteria, it's steering ODOT projects towards a better outreach and a better engagement for the entire project area. And so that increased the project the points a little bit. And of course, eligibility is pass or fail. That's what the pre-application is for. And then for the project refinement, we have much less because we anticipate they're not going to have that much in terms of project readiness. They may have done some work previously, and so we want to give them a reward for that if they have done previous work as part of developing this the proposal. But we anticipate that is going to be very low to begin with for everyone. And then again, we looked at the cost schedule of that based upon a standard template that we have and what we think that would cost. Right, going on to the next one. Any questions on this? And I'll back it up for you.
Any committee members have questions? I have something, but I want to let other people speak first.
Mm-hmm.
Not seeing any. Okay. So I'm curious about, I know I had submitted an application last cycle or previously, so I was familiar with the application form. I'm not seeing the applications posted online. So one of my questions is, are they going to be posted online, or at least a summary sheet, so that as a committee members, we have a better sense of the types of projects we'll be funding? And it also might respond to the public comment around having the transportation disadvantage index posted, or just like giving people a better breakdown of you're an applicant, you have a total score, but what happened kind of in the midst of the different scoring categories? Were there certain categories where your project scored better or worse to have more informed applicants? And then we also received that comment around from Becky Taylor regarding, lacking facilities versus having some infrastructure already in place. I believe when I looked at the application last time, there was a question that got at that piece of, is there something or not existing? And I'm curious if that's still in the application and where on this rubric that might be reflected.
Trying to remember, going for the first part, let me explain the equity, because I do believe that was a comment earlier. And for the equity, that is basically from the Transportation Disadvantaged Index. And we take the range of Transportation Disadvantaged Index and we break it up into 5 quintiles, and ranging from 0 to 100. And so where you scored in the TDI, the raw TDI score, we will give you a score either 25, 50, 75, 100, or something to that, since I don't have that in front of me. And then if there is a tie right on the edge, which is what we have with construction, we will take that raw TDI score. So we have the scores all ranked by the total number of points. And then we will also, after the addition, we'll also sort them by the raw TDI score. So then we have the ranking within the tide of who has a higher TDI score versus a lower TDI score for that tide. And that's how we do that. In terms of what I'm recalling from the last cycle in terms of other infrastructure, we asked about if it was parallel to a roadway. And we were finding, particularly in that cycle and also again in this cycle, is that is skewing the data a little bit. We're going to be revising that in the next cycle. Because when we try to look at safety, we're looking at, are you an alternative to a roadway, and what are the conditions of that roadway, and is there a bike lane on that roadway, and then what are the TDI, what are the conditions of that roadway. So we have a score based upon the number of lanes, the average speed, if there are any collisions in that section that near where you are being an alternative to. So that adds so that gives additional points. And so I think that's what you were referring to. And then going back to your very first question, yes, we did not post the individual applications up before. We will get them up. We will get them up very quickly. And we're just, well, probably within the next week or two.
Thank you. And so for the parallel to a roadway, where in the scoring would that be reflected? Is that
That'll be under safety,
or okay?
Because it's hard to judge safety for an off-street path. So we use whatever alternative roadway it might be an alternative to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm seeing that is a little tricky and nuanced, but could be helpful in future rounds to think about a little bit more. I think about, okay, well, is it parallel to a roadway? What's the facility type on that roadway? Because riding along, the 126 expressway versus a road that's not that level of volume and 65 mile an hour speeding cars be very different. And then also maybe the out of direction travel. I think about some regional multi-use path projects that, yes, there's a parallel alternative route, but is it 4 miles out of direction? Is it 8 miles out of direction? Is it half a mile out of direction? That would make a pretty big difference to folks. So both the facility type as well as the out of direction might be things we want to consider a bit more in the future cycles.
Exactly. And in your discussion, I'm thinking of one individual applicant right now where all that came into play. So if that could have improved their application score.
Good to know. Thank you. Any other committee members have questions on the scoring rubric part before we move on? Okay.
All right. So we received 52 applications totaling $82 million in total. And broke it down by the regions, region 1, 27, region 2, 46%. And it just goes to show that, we as in I need to really reach out to regions 3, 4, and 5 to try to get more applications from there. I know that some applicants who were planning on applying for this cycle decided not to, just because of COVID and staffing issues, and they thought it just might be best to wait another cycle. And that may be one of the reasons, but I don't think it is the only reason. So I know that we had 11 applications in Region 5 in the last cycle. So this is something that I am taking very closely to heart. So getting into the scenarios. So we're having scenarios. You have the applicant, the project title, the requested federal funding, because this is the grant amount and that's what we're going by. And the total federal funding, so that the total federal funding is accumulative. So we start, anytime a project is added, that's the requested amount gets added to the right side, and you end up with a cumulative total that then tells you how much money you are spending. And then once you hit your maximum, which we have right now at $30 million. So in the attachment that I had sent out along with this presentation, you see that there are some projects above the green line and some below. And then that far right column shows how much money is being spent with each one, and we cut it off before we overspend. And red is contingency list. Historically, ODOT has what's called a 100% list, which is the green. And then they go into other percentages. And so what we're doing, because this is still a new program, is we are saying these are all eligible projects because we determined that through the project refinement. So all of them are on the contingency list in priority order to the greatest extent possible, depending upon the funding available. So we're doing away with the 150% list and going to a contingency list. And let's talk about the contingency list. So let's say that you have a project and the grantee withdraws that project. So you have this available funds. So we look at which pot of funding was it, because federal construction, federal project refinement, or state construction. So we keep it in the same pot. So if someone withdrew from federal construction, we look in the federal construction pot and see what is next in the list that within that amount. So if it's a $3 million project that was dropped and the next project is $5 million, that creates a problem because we can't fund that project, but we have $3 million. So we go to the next one and see if that's $3 million, and then again until we can spend that money. And we will do that until March 31st, 2024, because starting in April, May, we start ramping up for the next solicitation cycle, and it will take 3 or 4 months to develop the IGA and get a project going. And we don't want to award a project while we're moving forward within the next cycle, because then it just makes sense to just add it to the next cycle once we start doing that again, once it starts again. And so the same thing with federal project refinement and state. Any questions on that? No. Okay, in that case, going on.
I want to say thank you for being responsive to last month's committee comments that led to having a contingency item in the slide deck today in this presentation. I have one comment, but I want to go to Lauren first.
Okay.
Thank you. I was wondering, you were saying that if a project is estimated to be more than what you have in the pot, do you ever go back to that applicant and say, hey, can you reduce your project to, you know, a level to be able to just to pay for it with just this amount of money?
We did not do that in the first cycle because it was smaller projects that were dropping out, and the next project, particularly for federal funding, was just right at $4 million. So we never got up to that $4 million for them, and we never got even close to anything remotely what might help them get that project going forward.
Is that something though you would consider so that you didn't have to pass over projects that might be able to?
That's a good idea. If it's I would say if it's within like 25%, we could talk to them about it.
Yeah, because they could maybe find money somewhere, you know, some other source to make up that difference too.
Yes, usually we would say they would have to come up with the balance. That's how we would normally do it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Lauren.
And I will add that to my list of lessons learned.
Yeah, we're kind of getting into some of the nuances, saying thank you for the contingency, and now how might we refine it to make it even better. So I think what Lauren raises one point, what I'm seeing with this as it might be applied to the construction list is that if it's one project at a time, say that there's a $4 million project that doesn't proceed forward, that received funding, that goes back. If that's applied to another project, we're going to systematically fund the smaller dollar amount projects further down the list, as opposed to funding the next project in line. So I
Correct.
wonder about an approach where we say, okay, from now until maybe the end of the year, you see what projects cancel, and then you have a larger lump sum to be able to fund in priority order based on the scoring, as opposed to having it be a piecemeal approach where we're funding smaller projects and the smaller projects are getting extra benefit even though they didn't score as highly.
So what I have here is, can we approach the next project on the list by waiting until close to March 31st and then see how much we have based upon all the other, what's happened with all the other projects. And then if we have enough, then we can approach them. Or if we're close enough, then we can approach them to say, can you scale down a little bit to be able to fund most of this?
Yeah. So the intention is to support enough funding building up so that you can keep in the scored project order as best as possible.
Mhm.
I am proposing that, but wondering if there are potential drawbacks that I'm not considering, such as cost of inflation. I mean, it's not that far out, but I'm wondering, are there any drawbacks with that approach that might do more harm with our overall goal of getting the dollars out the door, getting the paths built as soon as possible?
When we get into the construction priority funding scenario, that was one of my thoughts was, can we just, as a scenario 3 was to just, and I'll have to scroll down, I'm sorry. Let me go to the one
I
of
can
them.
revisit this once you've presented if you want to come back to it later. That's fine.
Yeah, let me go back to that when we get to that section, and then I can discuss that with that visual.
Sounds great. Thanks.
Okay.
Any questions on the contingency before we get into the scenarios? Okay, let's keep going.
All right, so first one is state, and this one is not a scenario because we had $4 million, and these are the projects. You can see the cumulative grant where everyone just gets added to the right, and we end up with $4,074,000, basically $4,075,000. We had about $120,000 in carryover in TOF funds from the last cycle that couldn't be used, that we will apply to this. So we can fund just a tiny bit more, but this will be able to get 7 projects in there. And key thing is, zoom right here, that 7 projects forming, and then we have only 2 projects. That's the neat part, is we're funding 7 out of 9 projects. So I'm not crimping this short. So there are only 2 projects that are not getting funded. And if any of them drops out, then we will go to them. Any questions regarding the state list? The key question is there any information you need to approve the state funded list, this list, at the next OBPAC meeting?
Pretty straightforward, not seeing anyone speak up, so let's keep going.
Okay. And then here the existing scenario for 2022 solicitation, we have $33 million, but we have just about 1.8 million in carryover funds from the previous cycle. That gives us a total of 34 million, let's just say close to $35 million in total available federal funds. So when we look at the project refinement, we end up just a tiny bit over 7,000. So we can take a tiny bit from the federal construction side to be able to fund the city of Happy Valley, just because it's so close to the 3 million. And then we have a much longer list afterwards. So Jefferson County is not the only applicant that's on the list. The full list, again, is in the attachment that I sent you. But this is just what's in priority order, not looking into anything else. So this is, if we did not have that additional funds, this is what we would be funding. And this is the construction. And so we end up with 9 projects for construction with the for federal. And moving forward, looking at this with Lane County, since we have 27,506 for after Hood River. And by the way, Hood River is the chosen project that will be receiving Safe Routes to School funding, and it'll be a mix of Safe Routes to School and OCP. But that is the designated Safe Routes to School project. So what we have with this is that if we have $2.5 million, and if Lane County has $5 million, if we were to just use this one, and we could wait for another $2.5 million to come in based upon anything being dropped out by the end of the year. And then if some does, then, or gets close enough to where we could fund Lane County, then that is an option. But, you know, the key question is, would that happen, and would that happen fast enough before we start getting into 2024? I have one grant right now where we just finalized that we are still going to do it, because there was some concern about whether they could still be able to do it. And we just reached an agreement on getting it done rather than shutting it down. And that was just today for cycle one, or this week, I should say. So that's the federally funded construction grant applications in priority order. And then, so when we look at the scenario, we're looking at the planning focused one, where we bump up, we bump up project refinement, and we end up with $4.9 million for project refinement. Or did I get that wrong? I think I got that wrong. But here's what we get with the federal, and this is the part that always bothers me a little bit, is that because we had a little over $2.5 million in federal, as I mentioned in the previous federally funded slide, we can fund Klamath County and end up with a small amount left of about $140,000 at the expense of Lane County. And then, you know, you end up with other projects such as City of Eugene and City of Albany underneath, where if something were still less than Lane County, let's say $3 million, let's say Coos County drops out, then we could fund Albany. And so you can see how that just cascades and drops. And these are the project refinement, and we fund 13 at $4,970,000. The reason why we have $4,970,000 is because of the amount that we're taking out of the state, out of the federal. And I'm going to make sure to double check on that after this is over, just to be on the safe side. And so then we have scenario 2, construction focus, and this is where we start putting all the money into federally funded construction, and try to keep project refinement as close to $3 million as possible. And this is where it just drops a lot. And this is the big one that goes into what you had said about, you know, we just keep on funding smaller and smaller projects until we run out. And a big high scoring project like Lane County does not get funded. And then we get into the project refinement. We end up, because we had a little bit left over from construction, we applied that to project refinement, and we were still able to fund one more project. And then the next project on the list is the other Lane County. So where Lane County previously would have been in there with scenario 1, it's out for scenario 2 for this project refinement grant. And here's a summary sheet of scenario 1, the planning focus. We have 10 construction projects, 13 project refinements, totaling $34,643,000 and 23 projects. And then scenario 2, we have 22 projects, 2 more allows us to fund 2 more construction, and at $34,700. And then we look at the bottom where we go by the dollar amount, $29.67 million for construction, still within the $30 million we originally had. And then scenario 2, 31.51. So there's not a huge benefit with scenario 2. And then with project refinement, we go from $4 million, almost $5 million in federal funds for project refinement, and 13 applications, or 13 grants, down to $3,100,000 for about 10 grants. So we're funding an awful lot that way. And scenario 1 remaining funds is 153,000, and scenario 2 remaining funds will be 91,500. So the questions that we have is, which scenario priority should we focus our federal funds? Construction, project refinement, or a mix of both? And is there any other information you need to approve a scenario for federal funding at the May OBPAC meeting?
Thank you, Ellen. So I think we'll get into that first set of questions, the scenario priority at the May meeting. We have a couple minutes to wrap this up. So I'm asking the committee on that second question, is there any other information that we need to approve a scenario for federal funding at the May meeting? Or anything that we want to discuss further with the contingency item? And then we'll be moving on to our letter approval, brief agenda item we're adding in. I'm hoping in the next few minutes here, but I want to make sure that we have time to voice anything that would be helpful, supporting us to make this recommendation at our next meeting.
And by the way, going back to this one, since this is an issue, I was thinking of your recommendation on lessons learned. Can we approach the next project list? If we could, let's say, hold off till the end of the year for 11, 14, and 18, Klamath City, North Bend, and if there are no projects that drop out that allow us to get Lane County in, then we would fund Klamath, Cottage Grove, and North Bend. I could make that as a scenario 3.
Thank you for your creative thinking on the fly there.
Thank you. It's something I've been trying to figure out because this, to be honest, this annoys me.
There's a lot of moving parts, and the intention here with this third scenario that you're thinking we could look at next time is to fund the projects that are scoring a lot higher and focus the resources there, recognizing that there's these increments. There's a lot of moving parts, so thank you for doing the best you can to bring forward options to our committee. Any questions from committee members, information that we need to be prepared for our May recommendation? Lauren.
Yeah, just kind of emphasizing that, alternative way of doing the scenario. I've had that instance where somebody's come back to me on an application and said, would you be willing to amend your application to the XYZ so that they would fit into the other category or be able to be funded? So, maybe reaching out to even Lane County and saying, hey, this is kind of what we're looking at. Would you be willing to amend your application? Kind of thing. And also maybe waiting till, closer to when people are more likely to drop out.
So far, what I'm
question.
Oh, yep. Please, who is there? Oh, Mavis. Yep.
Sorry. So Alan, why are these people dropping out? And is it something that we can fix? Because I prefer not to have people bailing. I mean, this is a large amount of money that we're saying, hey, go forth, do awesome, and then they're not being able to follow through. So is there something in there that we can tweak so that we are not awarding these people that are going to be backing out?
What we tried to do in this current cycle is really focus on one, if they have not done any preparation prior to, and this is a new project and they're very excited about it. One is to go through the project refinement process, because then the goal is for the output of the project refinement to be everything that you need. You're going to have technical scoping, you're going to have environmental prospectus, you're going to have a business case, all that stuff. We want to come out of the project refinement process to then you can then apply for a construction grant and have all that information right there and ready. So that gives them a leg up. The problem we were having is we would have something that had been planned and planning and design had been done 10, 15 years ago to meet state requirements. And they would come, then when we took over, and ODOT would have to do, it would basically would have to start from scratch again. Because it doesn't meet any of the federal requirements, and there's very little that you can pick up from the state, because you have to fill out all the federal forms and dot all the i's and cross the t's. So that's the other issue. And one of them was simply that they were along a railroad right of way, even though they were 120 feet from the railroad, and the railroad would not give them a chance for a path, even though it would have had all the safety limits of a fence and everything else. And it was a good distance away from the tracks. There was just a blanket policy that if it's going parallel to the right of way, that they will not grant any easement whatsoever, period. So we brought that forward as part of this cycle. So that's one of the reasons why we ask, is it in a railroad right of way, do you have the permission of the railroad? Because that can and will almost certainly be a deal breaker.
So Alan, is it fair to say that consultant-led scoping that you did for this round should help?
Yes.
Sure, we don't have those sorts of instances.
That's what we're hoping.
Okay.
So we have this information. I'm meeting with the consultants tomorrow to go over this, because this has all been very rapidly developing, and trying to get it all done to get the project scores to the committee. And now I'm getting into the meat of it tomorrow with them to discuss. And then we start going to the applicants and saying, well, we seem to see some issues here. But it was always the case, well, I could have gone to them a week ago, but then I don't want to raise any false hopes of, saying that they may or may not get it. And we're still in that situation, because we won't know until the OTC approves, but I'm in a safer place to approach them and discuss what their proposal is versus what we are seeing.
Okay, so it sounds to me like you're saying we had a problem, we came up with a solution, we're applying it, and we have a few contingencies just in case it doesn't work, but yay, we're fixing things. Awesome, thank you.
That's the bottom line, yeah.
Thank you, Alan, so much. So what I'm hearing is we'll be looking at these two scenarios. You'll also bring forward a third scenario that would try to score the next highest score on the list, knowing that we delay a bit. If some projects were canceled and enough funds were available to fund that next project, we go with the highest score, but have a cutoff date so that there's clarity on, by this date, either the funds are there or not. Here's the funding we have, fund what we can.
Correct.
So let's move forward with that for May. We're going to spend the last few minutes here of our meeting transitioning to a different agenda item to do a quick approval of a comment letter to the Oregon Transportation Commission on the Oregon Transportation Plan update. And so Jessica, or I guess I'll just grab the link. I think I have it, put it in the chat. And this draft letter came about by the working group meeting. It was myself, Mavis, and Aaron met. Andre was part of that working group, but didn't attend. But Andre, if you have things to chime in, please now speak up. I know you've been busy with conferences and other things going on in life. So the hope here is to approve the suggested track changes and get this letter moved along so that it's submitted by the comment date. And Mavis, I think you were the anonymous person in the document. So do you want to make any edits to address the comments that you mentioned?
I was going to wait until after the meeting because I can't pay attention and walk at the same time. So, but one of my comments, so this says who, we can't afford to maintain the existing system. Okay, so the prioritization, we're talking about one thing and then we skip to another. Who's saying that?
So ODOT's saying it in, I think, all presentations I've been to around funding for the last, I don't know, handful of years. I'm saying it, like, you can't fund all the things and have everything funded. Tough decisions need to be made. And maintenance of the existing system isn't happening up to like good conditions at the moment. So we could revise it with the suggested language I put in here. We could also strike that piece and just emphasize the maintenance of off-street paths, second part of that paragraph.
I like statements. So if you could say like the existing system, make it a positive affirmative. And I can do that later. I don't want to jump into it right now because honestly, it will come out gobbledygook.
Okay, so we could, I think if we can convey the concepts of what changes you're thinking, what items would be changing, and we can get approval from the committee to say, yes, we support that concept moving forward, then we wouldn't have to wait until after the comment deadline in our next meeting.
That sounds great. Let's do that.
Okay, so letter as written with, Mavis, would you be willing to explain the types of edits that you'd like to make following today's meeting, please?
A few minor flow edits, nothing substantial, just to make it a little more wordsmithy.
Any questions or comments from other committee members?
So Mavis, did you want to change that first sentence, or did you want to just make it a positive lead off, like moving?
I think it just needs to be a positive lead off, because to me it says we can't. I was just wondering who is supposed to be talking, honestly. Like, it looks like a quote, but it's not really a quote, because it's I mean, I understand where it's coming from because I've been sitting in a few of these meetings, but it's just I couldn't figure out who was talking. Here, I'll put on my blinders and I'll fix it right now, okay?
It looks like Jessica's helping out right now with the ODOT can't afford to maintain the existing system.
Perfect.
Does that solve what you're going for with that?
Yes, yeah, it was just like unclear to me, and if you're going to tell somebody that something's going on, there can't be any wishy-washy.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and accept the suggested changes.
I think if you're gonna do that, you'd have to do the same thing with the we in the next sentence and say it needs to prioritize.
Thanks, Lauren.
Well,
Okay. And then Mavis, you had made a comment about the unsatisfied engineering issues and the autonomous connected vehicle part. Did you want to make any edits to either of those? Or can we move it forward as is?
Hang on, I'm finding it.
can we change tech to technology? I know it's a stylistic thing, but it sounds more professional to me.
Yes, if I can find where it is.
Right above, two lines above where you were just looking. Last word,
Yep.
second to last word.
Perfect, thank you.
We can skip it. It's
Okay,
fine. Although I am finding it a little frustrating that all of a sudden the bike ped and all that is responsible for drainage.
I get that. And that's part of what our comments about, like the more complex gnarly projects are what are left once you do the easier ones. So.
Yeah,
Okay.
but we're not talking about a roundabout. We're talking about, oh, you didn't work on making sure your rainwater went anywhere. And now you want the bike people to like magically fix the ditch you made. Great.
So I think we have our letter here. I don't know why the formatting is a little bit weird on the color, but color doesn't matter. We'll get that cleaned up after the meeting. Committee members, I would like to ask for a motion to approve this letter and submit it to the Oregon Transportation Commission.
I move to approve the letter and submit it to the Oregon Transportation Commission.
Thank you. Motion by Lauren. Any second on the motion?
I'll second.
Thanks, Andre. So all in favor of submitting this letter to the Oregon Transportation Commission, please say aye and or raise your virtual or physical hand. Okay, I see a consensus of the committee members who are present. So that is moving forward, and thank you to the work group for pulling together a comment letter so that we can make some statements on this plan, which is pretty significant, then feeds into all the other modal plans and other policy work throughout the agency. Now with that, thank you for the extra few moments of your time. We'll call it a wrap and reconvene in person down in Southern Oregon for our May meeting next month. Have a great day. Enjoy the sunshine. Enjoy all the active transportation today and in the weeks to come. Happy spring, everyone. May is Bike Month. Go enjoy.
Thanks so much, everyone.